Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas Touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is, pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas Touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony, and with me, as always, is my co-host, the American Dragon, Mark Tipton.
This week, this nickname, which I do appreciate as always, did not go over my head by any stretch of the imagination this time. This week, on the 30-minute Midas Touch podcast, this is a subject that appeals to me as a wrestling fan at heart. We get to talk a little bit about two of the names in wrestling, two of the people who are making quite a buzz around the wrestling world right now. And that is, what we're wanting to discuss is the rumored, although I don't know if it's semi-official, they're not really hiding it very well, but the rumored signings by CM Punk and Bryan Danielson to become All Elite.
Yeah, I've been very critical of AEW at every level. You know, one of the things we talked about not long ago was how I felt that AEW wasn't hiring needle movers. You know, I mean, they weren't hiring guys that were going to change anything really for them. Great workers, but not necessarily guys that would change, buy rates or, television ratings or anything like that. Now this move, or these moves, that's contrary to that. I mean, Daniel Bryan and CM Punk are definitely needle movers.
Well, okay. Would it be fair to say that in these moves, based upon your comments there, we're seeing an evolution of AEW, and that they're maybe finding their foundation here and beginning to move, and improvement is what I guess what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, and okay, so let me tell you a little story. Like, I used to book for Ken Wayne, and we all know the trouble. We all know the trouble Ken Wayne's had over the last 5 years. But beside that point, I used to book for Ken Wayne, and Ken Wayne told me a story how he was working for a territory, and Nick Bockwinkel was there.
All right.
Right, and apparently this company had just a host of talent. Just one guy after another was just phenomenal workers and drew money everywhere. And Ken had made the comment to Bockwinkel that the owner or the promoter, whoever it was, must have really had his shit going to be doing so well. And Bockwinkel said, if I give an artist the best brushes and the best paint and the best canvas, then he should be able to make me a masterpiece. But it's when you give an artist not the best paints, not the best brushes, and not the best canvas, and he still paints that masterpiece, that's a true artist, right? So with that being said, like, they can have all the talent they want, but at the end of the day, it comes down to booking and creating whatever identity they're trying to create. And so far, I mean, let's be honest, they haven't done very well with appealing to professional wrestling fans like they said they were. You know what I mean? So I have little to no faith that they're going to do this correctly. I mean, the moments themselves, the moment Daniel Bryan shows up on that program, the minute CM Punk shows up on that program, those are going to be huge landmark moments, and they're going to garner a huge reaction and attention. But it's what they do with them after that. How are they going to book them after that? And how are they going to book the rest of the talent, too? Because now you got two guys that are obviously going to be taking up feature roles on the program. So,
all right. Excuse me. Let me go with this. Do you think that maybe the structure of AEW has perhaps led to the problems they've had? It's a rather scattered leadership model they have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big fan of, there needs to be one guy, right? One guy that finally says yes, no, whatever, right? And they try to tell you that Tony Khan is that guy, but okay, if Tony Khan is that guy, then what qualifications does Tony Khan have to be that guy? You understand? So I think he's just listening to a lot of the wrong people. You know what I mean? Just the fact that, that things like Stadium Football Massacre, whatever the hell that match was called, was something that they thought was a good idea. You know what I mean? Or even the ridiculous Broadway segment between between MJF and Jericho. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Like that kind of stuff is. We get enough of that kind of shit from WWE already. If you truly want to be an alternative to that, then don't be WWE light. You know what I mean? Be your own product. Be the opposite. Counterpoint them by showing them, hey, you guys may not focus on this, but we do.
Okay. Well, I take it from that you were not a fan of the Space Jam themed tag team match
Oh my
on
God,
Dynamite.
no, God. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And here's the thing too. It's not even. It's just they did the spot where Omega's holding the ball, right, and then the one Buck has got the guy in the tombstone on the outside, and the other guy comes in springboards and is going to dunk the basketball and then come down and do that all thing. Well, first he missed the fucking dunk, which is retarded, right? But also, like, it buries that guy that's getting tombstone. You understand? Like, if they're able to just joke around and fucking play around with it for as long as they want and still give him the move, then how does that make him look? And then in that instance, if he looks bad and you just beat him up, then you don't look great either. So I mean, it's a lose-lose situation.
All right. Well, I guess where I was kind of going with that is, and that match did strike me as a very sports entertainment kind of situation. Not something that appealed to me, but I've thought about, as I've watched it, it's kind of like I'm watching a group of different shows.
Yeah.
And my guess is that Cody Rhodes is the one I suspect would the one that appeal to me the most, at least his portions that he has influence over.
Yeah.
But I guess since our real focus is on CM Punk and Bryan Danielson, and their entry into AEW, what I would point to, well, and let me say very quickly, I would point to Hangman Adam Page as an individual that I think they've done a good job with. I don't know if you think that's fair. It's clearly someone that they're trying, and I suppose I could include Sammy Guevara. Those are two guys that are quote unquote AEW originals, for more or less, although they both wrestled beforehand. But guys that they're trying to feature and say this is where we're going.
Right.
A, would that be fair? And B, I want to go back to the way they've used veterans.
Sure. Okay, so with Hangman Adam Page, for me, and I talked about it, when The Rock debuted at Survivor Series '96, right? In a year and a half, he was the WWE champion working the main event at WrestleMania because he caught that momentum, and WWE booked with the momentum because that's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to ignore the momentum. You know what I mean? So, to me, AEW sometimes has ignored the momentum with him because he legitimately could have been the champion already. You know what I mean? Because people loved him and they were behind him, but they just kind of kept him hovering for a little bit. And the longer you do that with somebody, the more likely it is they're going to fizzle out.
All right.
Sammy Guevara, on the other hand.
Okay.
Sammy Guevara, from the independent scene, he burned every fucking bridge he could in Texas, I think.
Okay.
And he was just one of those guys that just didn't have a clue, right? Same thing with Ricky Starks. He's another guy that everyone's thought were really good, but one of the quotes about Ricky Starks was he's as dumb as a box of rocks. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's like, and those guys, I'm sure that they're just doing what they're told to do, but I don't like what they present to professional wrestling fans. We've talked about it before, the difference between sports entertainment and professional wrestlers. I don't want anyone to ever come up to me and say, I want to be a sports entertainer when I grew up, and that's kind of what I feel like they're kind of presenting.
All right. Yeah, those two talents.
Yeah.
In particular, Ricky Starks, I think I do see what you're pointing at there. I do see those tendencies. I guess another direction we would because we're speculating about what direction that CM Punk and Bryan Danielson will be used, and I suppose what I would base my opinion on, and I think I'm the more positive point of view on this one than
Sure.
certainly are than you. But I would look at the way the veterans that I've seen brought in recently. I have been rather pleased with what I see in their role. We can look at Sting or Christian Cage or a number of others. You may want to cite others because they have used quite a few. How would you view the way they've used other veterans and more named talent in developing their brand?
Yeah, I mean, like Sting is a huge, Sting's a huge deal, and obviously he's not going to be able to wrestle every week or do whatever, but he's going to be used sporadically in featured roles like we're talking about now. You have one of the greatest baby faces of all time, in Sting, and then you have him do the little bullshit spot with Orange Cassidy. Was it last week or the week before?
Yes.
And that kind of stuff just hurts my soul. You know what I mean? Because, like, have we fallen so far that he forgets where he came from? You know what I mean? Like, would he have done that in '88 when he was trying to be world champion? No, because no one would take him seriously, right? Well, it's the same thing now. Now no one takes it seriously. You know what I mean? And that's part of the problem is no one thinks any of this stuff is urgent or it even matters because it's just another television show, like we talked about before. So, and Christian Cage, yeah, he's in that workhorse role, and that's kind of the gimmick he was coming in with was outwork everyone, right? So he's kind of in that workhorse role where he's kind of making his way up the ladder to eventually get to Omega, I guess. And that's one match I am interested in just because I like seeing Kenny Omega with guys that actually know how to fucking work. And when he's with someone that actually knows how to wrestle and knows how this business actually is meant to work, then his athleticism makes it a very special thing. You know what I mean? I think the best match he had was not Okada. I think the best match he had was Jericho. Yeah. Because it was so old school, so Memphis, so everything we talk about.
Sure.
And it worked. Everyone believed it. The entire world, Japan included,
Well, yes, that was the Painmaker persona that Jericho brought in, whatever you want to call it. I remember in one instance when he went after Tetsuya Naito, he caught him. I think it was even out of the crowd. It just totally surprised him and brutally attacked him and really made it, personal, intense, and physical, and real, so to speak, however you want to say it. It certainly, it wasn't going to be a 6-star, but it was something that certainly drew the audience in. I think that's fair.
Yeah, and of course, one of my big dreams was always to work in Japan. And like I said, I've been, people have cut my throat a couple times on my opportunities to go there. Now, Matt Riviero, one of my closest friends, he went over there, and he told me a very valid point that I'd actually never even thought of before. But if you look at all the Americans that really, really got over in Japan, they were presented as this just crazy American, thing, right? Stan Hansen, Terry Funk,
Right.
Vader, for instance.
Exactly.
Bam Bam Bigelow. All these guys are just presented as
wild
and uncontrollable and stuff like that. So Jericho doing that was in that same essence. You know what I mean? Like no one's gonna tell him what to do. Oh, I'm supposed to wait till the bell rings? No. I'm gonna hit you on your way to the ring when you least suspect it. That was unique to Japan. It was different. In Japan. So I mean, it really caught their eye.
All right, that may be kind of give some kudos to Chris Jericho there for kind of knowing the audience.
But then Jericho goes and does the Broadway bullshit with MJF. And it's like, what's wrong with being professional wrestling? What's wrong with just presenting professional wrestling in the art form that it is rather than trying to change it or morph it into Saturday Night Live or whatever the hell else you want it to be? So, that's where I'm torn on a lot of guys. I'm torn on Sting. I'm torn on Chris Jericho because I respect them so much and some of the things they've done throughout their careers, but at the same time, I'm very, very disappointed in them in today's wrestling.
Okay, well, if I came at it this way, when I see what Sting has done, I realize, and when I saw the interaction with Orange Cassidy, I could just imagine your reaction as I watched that. I thought,
That seems to be a common thing. People go, I bet Golden Boy is losing his shit
all
right
right, I could just imagine. That is something I certainly saw that point of view. I tend to kind of let that go. What has struck me most about Sting and his time in AEW is it looks to me like they've taken veterans and paired them with younger talent. In the case of Sting, you constantly see him in the presence of Darby Allin, and he's clearly trying to have an influence and help Darby Allin progress. With Christian Cage, I have constantly seen him put with Jungle Boy.
now.
Jack Perry. I've seen them kind of paired together, and several times I've seen them working together. And even with Jericho, I would say that Sammy Guevara kind of came under his wing.
Sure.
And that's a role for veterans, established names, with experience to give. And I see them kind of in a mentorship kind of role. Do you think that's a wise thing that AEW has done?
Yeah, I mean that's something that's been going on in the business for decades. Is you take a young guy and you put him with a veteran, whether you're working against him or working with him. Either way, it's a learning process, and you season them that way. A lot of these guys are talking about they've never really been on a national stage, and they've never really they don't know the difference between actual television wrestling and whatever bullshit they did before. Like Darby Allin, I'm not a fan of Darby Allin, obviously, but I see the appeal of him, right? Obviously, he has an interesting look. You know what I mean? I don't like I don't think he has to wear black Daisy Dukes with
Right, I'm not a fan of that. That's fair.
I mean, I don't understand. And I'm sure he can tell me some intricate thing of why he wears what he wears, but
yeah, they're over the top of a pair of black tights. For those of you not seen Darby Allin, so to speak,
it's just it's something like I would see at one of these local wrestling mud show bullshit. So I'm not a fan of that. So they pair him with Sting because they both have face paint. Basically, is what it boils down to. I would have much rather seen Sting with someone else. You know what I mean? Someone that's 100% going to be a main event player. You know what I mean? I mean, imagine Sting trying to mentor Adam Page, for instance.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That would have been a good one. Now, I do like the Christian Cage, Jack Perry one because I am a fan of Jack Perry. I think that kid has a huge upside, but he needs to be, like Jim Ross had said originally, he needs to be Jungle Boy Jack Perry and not just Jungle Boy.
okay,
Because Jungle Boy can only get so high,
right,
right? But Jungle Boy Jack Perry, that's a good gimmick.
right.
You
And
know what I
Jim
mean?
Ross has made a point of saying his name.
Several times. So we all know his name,
Right.
but they're not.
I did not prior to Jim Ross. I did not know his name.
Oh, you didn't know his name?
The first several times I saw him appear, I only heard Jungle Boy, but then I noticed Jim Ross making a point to say his name.
Yeah, because I mean, his dad was famous. I mean, 90210 and Luke Perry. I mean, huge star in and film and television industry, and to capitalize on that, and that's where I heard about him. Like years when he was still on the independent scene, I'd heard Luke Perry's son's wrestling. I was like, well, that's fucking odd. So I went and checked him out, and he wasn't too bad. I mean, he was small, but he's adding some size now, and he's progressing. Do I think he's going to be world champion next year? Of course not. But in 5 years, that could be a possibility.
That's certainly very real. I really feel like now we've kind of talked about the way they've used veterans. Now comes the sort of $1 million question here. AEW, Tony Khan, has brought in CM Punk, and as far as I know, he gets to be CM Punk. I believe he used it in UFC.
Yeah.
So CM
He
Punk,
owns his name.
I believe that is his property. And as you all know, my ownership of names has been a pet peeve of mine. And so and that's why I've been careful to say Bryan Danielson,
right?
Because I'm training myself to erase that other name that no longer, as far as I know, if this is true, no longer exists. But now I think the $1 million question is: you bring these two gentlemen in. Do you bring them in to be your leaders at the top of the card? I'm here to draw money, sell tickets, whatever. Or am I looking at them as an opportunity to develop younger talent for the long term?
So when you talk about the top of the card, the top guys, it needs to be like a ladder. But in most cases, it becomes a carousel. You understand? It ends up being the same guys over and over, just recycled, right? But instead, it needs to be a ladder. It needs to be guys working up and down, you know, creating new talent and then letting them come up and have their moment. So those guys that already had it can go down and then come back up. You see what I'm saying? Like it needs to be more like that. So like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, and like I said, they're needle movers, and they can honestly say that at one point in time in the business, they were the hottest thing going. And that's a rare thing. Like when we talk about who can honestly say that they were the hottest thing in professional wrestling at any given time, right? And they can legitimately say that, you know. So that automatically makes them, in my opinion, more special than most of the roster. You know what I mean? So yes, I think they need to be at top of the card. The other problem is that, you know, and I've talked about this before, the WWE conundrum is, in my opinion, the reason that they got over in the first place was that WWE had spent so many years telling us this is fake, this is phony. You know, basically what the fans believed was that every decision made by WWE then became arbitrary, that they lashed out, and like whoever WWE handpicked, say a John Cena or Roman Reigns or whoever, they lashed out at them like, no, we don't want them. You know, I mean, we want this guy. And that other guy just happened to be the most anti-WWE guys that there were at the time, right? Daniel Bryan was not a WWE guy. You know what I mean? Like, not that
By
mold.
no stretch.
By no stretch. Same thing with CM Punk. Like, he was not, you know, he didn't have that look that we become associated with like The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan and Triple H and, you know, Undertaker. You know, they just weren't those guys. But they got over. And that's the thing. Once you get over, no matter how you got over, you pretty much stay over unless they try to bury you 12 feet deep. Right? So they haven't buried those guys. Punk left before they could bury him.
Right.
And then Daniel Bryan, he never got to the point to where he was getting just buried.
No.
So I think they still have a lot of momentum that they could help, but once again, it all comes down to booking.
All right. Well, I was curious how you would go with that, and I do like the idea. I was trying to imagine if, you know, very quickly we see one or the other make their way into contact with Kenny Omega, for instance.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a huge match. And those are money matches that, you know, you need to be looking at a year down the road, 2 years down the road. Build it up till then. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If they come in the first month or two and do Daniel Bryan versus Kenny Omega, then to me they've completely shot their load.
All right.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So, yeah, like, and Punk, if I'm not mistaken, is it All Out that's next?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And
it's in Chicago.
And it's in Chicago.
So the temptation would be there.
I mean, yeah, if you, and that's the thing too, if they don't do it there, they're idiots. Because that is Punk country.
Sure.
Right? Like we talk about Horseman country. It is 100% Punk's country. I mean, he really you know, put his stake in the ground there, and like I can't think of another wrestler that's more over in Chicago than him, besides maybe the Legion of Doom. But like,
well, yeah, and there you're kind of going back into history a little bit. I try to remind myself it has been a while for the Legion of Doom. I'm sure people remember them, but I will say this about CM Punk: the fact that his name has remained on the lips of the wrestling fans,
yeah.
And this is where I get, I'm the fan. He has stayed on my mind constantly, and you know, and because I really felt like he did not. Let me explain it. When I watch, the things that appeal to me, well, the things that immediately turn me off is if I see a guy who I feel like is not giving everything he has.
right.
And I never felt that with CM Punk.
Right.
But ultimately, I don't know how else to say this. I want a guy, when I see a guy who A, gets it, and B, likes it,
Right.
And I feel like in the case of both these guys, these are, in my opinion, these are two guys who understand professional wrestling and actually like professional wrestling.
Yeah.
And it felt like other things kind of pushed them away from it, but not wrestling itself. Is that clear?
Yeah, and you talk about all the time how you're looking at things from a fan's perspective, and I'm still a huge wrestling fan, and the thing with wrestling fans is we want what we can't have, right? So CM Punk was abruptly taken away from us. You know what I mean? And obviously, in the back of our minds, we're like, well, he can still go. You know what I mean? Why isn't he there? Why hasn't he done this? Why hasn't he done that? And obviously, it's personal issues and all the trouble he had with WWE and just whatever. But it's always a unique dynamic for guys to come into a new company like that and trying to find their way. Because, like, I'm sure they have some moniker of creative control for themselves. I'm sure everyone of major value, name value, does. So it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. Because, like we said, a lot of times we're not watching what seems like one show. We're watching 15 because there's so much different booking decisions going on.
Yeah, at least 3 different directions. Because I see segments where I think Bucks, segments I see Kenny, segments I see Cody. The Cody segments, the ones I suspect are Cody, are the ones that appeal to me most.
Yeah, Cody segments are, at least they're trying to be old school. And sometimes, like I said before, sometimes I just feel like he misses the mark. I don't think he has the skill set to be his dad or even his brother. But, like, he makes you believe as best he can. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he wants to be that main guy. Back to CM Punk for just a second. That brings up a point about him is, like, CM Punk. Yeah, if you watch him, he's not the greatest wrestler. You know what I mean? Like, he's not perfect. You know what I mean? He sometimes he fucks up on hip tosses and just he's not a natural, as we would say. And I talked to Ace Steel about this too. Like, he said the same thing. Like, he didn't get physically, he didn't get it immediately like some people do, right? But CM Punk, whatever room he fucking walked into, he really thought he was the best in the world. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff resonates. You know what I mean? And it projects you bigger than you actually are sometimes. So even though he was maybe missing some of those qualities, he completely made up for it in that confidence, in the promos, and just the whole presentation of himself.
All right. I suppose very quickly, one thing we want to get into is with us discussing CM Punk, he did spend a short period of time in the UFC. It was not successful at all. Do you feel that in any way kind of limits his appeal or diminishes his appeal to the audience?
I think it's going to be in the back of people's minds, and like a lot of this stuff ends up being kind of subconsciously. You understand? Like, I remember when he first debuted in WWE, and they were giving talks about how he had this Muay Thai background, and he did kickboxing and done all these kicks and did the submission hold, stuff like that. Like, so to me, if he comes back and tries to do that realistic fighting, kind of whatever, people are going to shit all over it because they're going to be like, dude, we saw you get your ass kicked, your ass handed to you on several occasions. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't think that kind of stuff, and people may not even realize that's what they think, but like I said, it's going to be subconsciously. You know what I mean? They may not be as invested in him as they once were because that's in the back of their mind.
Okay, well, this is where it's very interesting. Maybe it is intensely subconscious because I, sitting over here as the fan in this position, could not possibly care any less about what happened in UFC. He never should have been there. He should have been in WWE the whole time. He is, in my opinion, a wrestling guy. He understands and actually seems to like pro wrestling as much as he doesn't like the backstage aspects of it. And I think the same can be said of Bryan Danielson. So having them involved with pro wrestling again just absolutely thrills me. If this was designed to appeal to, I don't know, I hate to use the term, I want to say smart mark or whatever you want to use it, but whatever it is, I feel like these moves are designed to coming at me. I'm the target audience for this, and if so, it is working. I'm very enthusiastic about seeing what these two guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's another thing too, and I think you're going to make my point for me here is, I mean, you're already watching AEW, right?
Yes.
That's their fan base is the hardcore diehard fans anyway. So if they're making decisions just to get you, which is great for you, but they're not broadening their aspect. You understand what I'm saying? So like, even though it appeals to you and the normal fans, like we're missing a whole segment of people. They need to be trying to create new fans. You know what I mean? And to do that, you have to have a broader spectrum.
Well, this is where we might ought to shift the focus because when I look at the two guys, I think they have two very different appeals. And I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong on this. CM Punk, we've kind of focused on him a little bit, but to me, he's the more hardcore fan appeal. The people who chant his name at WWE shows that he's never going to appear at. Though people like me, and I'm sure there are many what I'll call normie fans who didn't know what everybody was yelling about. Bryan Danielson, on the other hand, is someone who has had a more normie / wide public appeal with the Yes movement, etc., and so forth. He's someone who has been featured in that way. Do you think he, more than CM Punk, would be able to appeal to a wider audience?
And I think what you're talking about actually plays into the gimmicks that they played on WWE. Like, Daniel Bryan was presented as a man of the people.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So he becomes
very
very
Occupy Raw.
Yeah, he becomes very relatable to that. While CM Punk, he was, yes, he was the voice of the voiceless, but for the majority, he was the dastardly heel that talked shit and, put fly in the ointment, I guess you would say. That was kind of his appeal,
Right.
like a Roddy Piper almost.
Exactly. Badmouth Vince McMahon and Triple H and Stephanie on WWE television.
Make fun of him for not bringing back ice cream bars.
Exactly.
And, make ice cream bars fucking trendy again to where they have to start making them again.
Exactly.
Stuff like that. So, and like Daniel Bryan, he's a phenomenal, Daniel Bryan and I started around the same time, and actually when I got my first break in Memphis Championship Wrestling, he was there. He was there as the American Dragon. He was there under a mask, and he was a heel, but he was doing a Hacksaw Jim Duggan type-esque, because he was the American Dragon, right? So,
Sure.
And he was trying to do like a hacksaw type thing, which was entertaining, but you could tell that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to wrestle. So, like, there was times when he got to wrestle William Regal, which was great.
Right.
And then there was times when he had to, wrestle whomever and do shtick like that. So it was Memphis to me. I don't think appealed to him. Even though I think that if he really gave himself to it, it would have lended a lot better for him because he ended up doing a lot more Memphis stuff later in his career to because he couldn't do.
Right. The Ring of Honor, Bryan Danielson.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, which was very physically intense and
and just you gotta take care of your body.
Right.
You understand? Like Daniel Bryan, like he had the injury where he had to give up the title right after WrestleMania, and then when he came back, he did not slow down at all. He did all of his same shit, and like I'm watching this when he comes back, I go, dude, you cut that shit out. No one's going to ask for their money back because you didn't do the top rope drop kick. You know what I mean? They want to see you are over. Whatever you do will be over. You don't have to do all this other stuff to appease yourself or whatever. You know what I mean? So to me, like the fact that he had to take so much time off was almost I think it was more of an eye-opening experience for him because in my opinion, it was basically his fault. You know what I mean? Because, like, you got to take care of yourself. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and really, when I say about the lead up to the Yeselmania and so forth, WrestleMania 30 and all that, really, I will say for me, was the highlight on Monday Night Raw. It seemed like he would routinely be in handicap matches or other things where he was working and physically intense and hard, and it certainly worked. And I could always, and the matches were fantastic. But I do admit, like you, when he came back, I thought I would see a change, and I really didn't. And maybe it was an instance where he thought, hey, this is what I'm known for. If I don't deliver, maybe I won't be as well received anymore.
Yeah, and that's just ego. You know what I mean? Like you have to step outside yourself. Like I'm 40 years old now. You know, there's lots of shit that I did when I was 20 that I can't do anymore, and I'm not gonna do anymore because the risk of me injuring myself to the point to where I couldn't do this anymore is greater now, obviously. So like, there's just some stuff I'm not gonna do. I mean, it's just the way it is, and that's what everyone has to eventually. They have to get to points like that where they go, okay, that's enough. You know what I mean? I mean, you watched me most of my career in the early days. I did a top rope elbow every match. You know what I mean? Now I do it once a year, maybe. You know what I mean? Just to pull it out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And show people that it can be done. But like, I can't do that every week. If I did that every match now, I couldn't walk. You know what I mean? And that's what you kind of have to. You have to have that inner self
Discipline, I suppose.
discipline, yeah, to go. You know what? This may be what I want to do, but this is what I need to do.
Okay. Well, and I suppose the argument I've always heard, and you may say if this is correct, but when you approach it that way, when you do whatever that thing is that you don't do often, it becomes a bigger deal than if you do it every week. Say the way we see like Jeff Hardy do some of the things he's done and do them week after week after week, that it kind of takes away from the specialness of some of the things he's done.
Yeah, and that's something else. Another territory guy told me was, he didn't do the tope the first week in a territory. You know what I mean? The first week he hit the ropes, he ran the ropes like he was going to, and the guy moved out of the way and he just stopped, right? And then the next time he went to do it, the guy moved out of the way and he did the 619. Right, and then he went to do it on the house show thing, but the guy moved out of the way and he lands on the apron, right, and steps back in and stuff like that. And then eventually, 4 to 6 weeks later, then he hits the tope. But you've seen him progressively try to hit it for weeks at a time before it's actually there.
Yeah, I know time is short. I guess real quick, the last thing I want to get in is the fact that we're talking about two guys who have not officially been announced as a part of the roster. When you bring someone in like this as a promoter, do you think it is better to kind of let it get out and the talk to build, or about the two guys coming in, or would you rather go for the oh crap moment and have them surprise the audience?
Yeah, see, for me, like, I love surprises. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, like, most people want to find out what they're getting for their birthday or Christmas or something like that. I always wanted to be surprised. Like, I'll wait till then. You know what I mean? It was fun for me to wait. So for me, like, even in wrestling, I try to make as many surprises or surprise decisions as I can. You know what I mean? And make people wait, and I try to kayfabe and don't tell anybody anything. And, like, I'm pretty good at, keeping things under wraps. I really think that, like, AEW and WWE and guys like that, they need what I like to call a kayfabe clause in their contract that basically says, you can't talk about this shit. You know what I mean? You can't give dirt sheet guys something to write about, stuff like that. So if a leak happens, you'll end up knowing where it come from, So for me, it's always a surprise. So yeah, I want to see. I just want to. If we didn't know this, if we didn't know Daniel Bryan and CM Punk were maybe on their way there, and people were talking about it, and we're just watching one night, and they fucking show up. Think of that moment right now. Now we're kind of expecting it.
Right.
It's still going to be big. Don't get me wrong.
It's going to be big, but I guess the mental picture I had is, say they were at Chicago at the All Out pay-per-view, and whoever is in the ring, and all of a sudden you hear a Cult of Personality kick on the speakers.
Yeah.
Now, in Chicago, you hear that song, and I have heard rumors that's not the song he's going to use in AEW.
Yeah.
But in any event,
I don't see why not. Tony Khan has already paid for.
He's paid for Wild Thing and
Jungle Boy.
Jungle Boy. Orange Cassidy uses a song.
Yeah.
If
I love that song too, but I hate Orange Cassidy.
But I just thought, and if you could just, have someone in the ring, an MJF, whoever you want to say, a someone who's hated, or it would be a chance for Kenny Omega to really get a heel reaction, so to speak.
Sure.
And then just have that Cult of Personality hit in Chicago. I mean, I could see the goosebumps.
Right. The only problem with the Kenny Omega part was he would so ham it up, overact it, that it would kill the moment.
Instead of being
like, oh shit, like
I'm in trouble.
I'm in trouble. He would do all the weird facials, and it would become a comedy segment after that. So that's another thing.
Maybe MJF would be better.
Maybe. All right, so we are way over time. We're almost at 40 minutes now.
Oh,
so for myself, the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, and my co-host, the American Dragon, Mark Tipton, thank you and goodbye.